your neighborhood? You could be eligible for up to $50,000 in funding through the City of Seattle's Neighborhood Matching Fund. Grants are awarded to grassroots projects that build stronger communities, with an emphasis on projects led by impacting Black, Indigenous, and people of color BIPOC communities. To learn more about the Neighborhood Matching Fund or to see if your project meets the criteria, visit seattle.gov/neighborhoods/NMF.
Hello, listener. What's important to you about what's going on in your community? Are you interested? Are you concerned? In any case, I invite you to tune into my show, Seattle Here and Now, on Rainier Avenue Radio App. Why? I will be covering a wide range of topics important to you and impacting the community. Each show will have a special guest or guests to share with you information on a variety of subjects that are happening here and now in Seattle. I promise I will work hard to make my show informative, interesting, and entertaining. Be sure to listen to Seattle Here and Now on Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music All Day Saturday. Music All Day Saturday.
This is Edwin Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the Cabinets.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy.
Start Time.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Pierce. This is Start Time.
Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae Hour, Hey Fox Night.
Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the box.
Fresh Juice, D-Money in the group.
Myself, D-Money.
Nice Ice Patron.
Taylor Hart.
Resistencia, the Northwest Rap Gang.
DJ Medina. Chad Cheddar. Northwest Rap Game.
Sergio Lacour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell her who we talking.
Sea Monster Radio, Mo Jams is your jam.
We're live. Welcome to Mojo Mondays. This is KZ of KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mojo Mondays.
Just my opinion. God is inspiration all day and all night. Saturdays on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenue.world.
Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Wise Action Radio Show with Rainier Avenue Radio. My name is Nicolette Worrell. I am co-hosting with my colleague Johnny Buck. Hello, Johnny. How are you doing?
Hello, my name is Johnny Buck, and I'm happy to be here. It's beautiful in Seattle, and yeah, it's very bright and sunny, and I'm really excited to talk about environmental justice, conversations, things happening in our world.
Awesome. And shout out to Rainier Avenue Radio for having us and allowing us to host this show. Again, this is our very first episode and it's live, which is extremely exciting. I want to kick it over to you, Johnny. What's your first question that we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so just letting the audience know, we're going to be setting a premise here. So we're going to be defining what environmental justice means broadly in the broader community, but also what it means from the Indigenous perspective. So Nicolette can share with us what it means broadly.
Yeah, awesome. So environmental justice is something that's kind of becoming almost like a buzz phrase now and has been for a little while. A concise definition for it from Leah Thomas's The Intersectional Environmentalist that came out last year is the fair treatment of all people, regardless of identity, in regard to their environment. So essentially talking about the sort of cross-section between environmental science and social justice, incorporating those two things together in the way that social justice impacts environmentalism and vice versa. However, that's an extremely broad sort of umbrella definition that while it hits on a lot of topics, it doesn't dive deep into many others. And one of those being the Indigenous perspective of environmental justice. So I want to bring it back to Johnny and ask what the Indigenous perspectives for environmental justice is in your experience and your point of view, and also just kind of on a broader scale as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm certainly going to be overgeneralizing because we don't have enough time to go in depth about it. But it comes from the essentially from the lived experience from a point of contact and after. So involves colonization. And here in the Pacific Northwest, like around the world, people were excited when some of the early explorers had shared, and the word got out about the abundance of natural resources here, especially with salmon and timber. And they're just like, it's wild and abundant and pretty much like free for the taking. And but when they got over here, they had realized there was a lot of like indigenous people. So what happened was a number of epidemics came through and essentially wiped out, like a conservative estimate is like 90% of the people, just to remove them. And then soon after that, the U.S. cavalry and the U.S. government at that time had taken the indigenous people to war and forced to sign peace treaties. So there were some tribes that signed peace treaties and some that didn't. And that's where we're at today. But there was substantial loss with the great dying of like 90% of the population. There was a great loss of land. And some people talk about it as the biggest redistribution of wealth that this country has ever seen. So there was a lot lost. So when we talk about environmental justice from an indigenous perspective, we have to recognize and acknowledge all of these things that had happened and what was lost. So environmental justice means revitalization of traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, revitalization of ceremonies and faith practices, culture, ways of being and knowing, and so along with the definition from the broader community.
Awesome. And I kind of want to reemphasize here the reason that incorporating Indigenous perspectives in environmental justice, the reason that that's so important based off of what Johnny was just saying, the amount of loss, both of people and of natural resources, especially in the Pacific Northwest, but in North America in general. The current system that we're living under was sort of built on that loss. It was sort of built on that taking advantage of people and resources and land. And so incorporating Indigenous perspectives in things like environmental justice that kind of has this broader overreach in a bunch of different fields like policy or science or social science or anthropology or whatever it might be, incorporating that in there is a way of acknowledging not only the historical trauma and the historical oppression and systemic erasure, but also as a way of creating this alternative or this this new avenue that looks both back and forward by recognizing what has happened and what we can do about it. So moving forward with that, kind of thinking about what's contributing to Indigenous perspectives, Johnny, you had mentioned traditional knowledge or traditional ecological knowledge. Could you talk a little bit more about that and maybe dive deeper into what that means for folks who might not know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a place-based knowledge, and so if we imagine like whatever landscape that we're from, say if it's here in Seattle, the landscape is very unique, and we can say that it's unique all over, right? And so there's certain, like if we talk about it in terms of like environmental ethics or like the ecosystems that are there, how those relationships between, say, plants or animals or fish or just land in general and waterways, how those things were taken care of or protected, and some of the principles. One of the main ones was when people were making decisions or of like how to take care of the land, they look forward many generations. So it wasn't about like owning the land, but it was more about taking care of the land so that our successors, or a legacy is set, and we can continue to advance our people thriving in abundance, and continuing to enhance our health, and our well-being by having like healthy environments. So it was. It wasn't. It wasn't just by like happenstance that there was abundance out here, but it was because of the care that the indigenous people had, and love that they had for the land and the water and all living life forms. So they were stewarding those relationships for thousands of years, and that abundance is really demonstrates that relationship they had.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you for that. One of the things that's really sticking out to me in this conversation is kind of what you were just talking about with relationship to land and the sort of reciprocal nature that came with that and comes with that still. And also intersectionality. And so kind of looking from a historical perspective and the way that land was, quote unquote, managed wasn't what it looks like today. Today, it's much more about ownership and land use rather than relationship with land. I'm interested in hearing what you might have to say about that in terms of having a relationship with land during a time where that's not something that is considered normal anymore within like Western society, within Western government. Land as a lowercase L has a relationship nature. You have legal ownership over it, whereas in the past that might not have been something that was as common or even considered at all.
Yeah, so the way that my people perceive land is our mother. So it's where we come from, and I guess overgeneralizing and very simplifying, we're going to die and we're going to return to the land. So it's where we come from, and it's where we're going to return to. So when we look at the earth as our mother, and we take care of it that way, it has a lot of value. It's a sacred relationship that we have, just like that sacred bond a child has to mother, like we all do. Like like women have that that sacred like ability to create life, right? And when we're born, just like me, the relationship that I have with my mother, because she takes care of me, right? And has always taken care of me. And I take care of my like self now, but she's always there, like very unconditionally, right? And when challenges come up, in the most difficult times of my life, no matter what, she's there. Like when I'm hurting, when I'm facing challenges, I can always call on her, and she's going to share with me concern, and she's going to get me to a place of like, what address my needs, whatever that's healing, some encouraging words to get me through, or whatever it is, and I demonstrate reciprocity too, and just as a child of my mother, I take care of her too. I show up for her and protect her. There to listen, because she also goes through her trials and tribulations. So it's a reciprocal relationship, and I guess if we talk about it in the cosmology with people and the earth, if we take care of the earth is going to take care of us.
Thank you for that. Just a reminder, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is the Wise Action Radio Show. It's our first episode, and we are live right now. We're talking about environmental justice in Indigenous perspectives. So moving forward with that in mind, Johnny, I want to kind of touch on intersectionality. And intersectionality is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. And it's basically the concept of multiple overlapping positionalities. So in this case scenario, some of the overlapping positionalities that we're talking about here is an Indigenous perspective, an Indigenous lifestyle, and then also general historical and systematic marginalization and oppression and erasure within the United States as we're talking about it now. And I kind of want to talk about intersectionality in the sense of environmental justice and Indigenous perspectives a little bit more. So specifically about that historical erasure and why addressing that in particular is important moving forward, and why that's a prominent part of Indigenous perspectives. Just kind of the importance of looking backwards before we look forwards. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that question. And I mean, when first we were tried people tried to eradicate us, right? By all means, right? Genocide, like I talked about earlier, with like the warfare, and then taking us to war, and still weren't able to kill us off, right? And then we had the peace treaties, and one of the articles in most all of the peace treaties is the right to education, and that was our education was through the Department of War at the time, and the person who was leading it, it was a forced assimilation process. So it was about killing the Indian and saving the man, and then the children were forced to go to boarding schools. So that means they were divided from their family. They were sent away, far away to the boarding schools, and punished for. The first thing was cutting their hair. Punished for speaking their language, singing their traditional songs, or anything that pertained to their cultural lifeways. They were punished for, and that whole history we don't hear about in schools, right? In the curriculum, and in public school or private school, like growing up. It's getting a little bit better, but it certainly it's still not there, right? And so that contributes to the erasure. And if you like Google like Native Americans, what you're going to find mostly is old pictures, like we're in the past, like we're not alive anymore, or not modern. And when you ask somebody who's never met a Native American, and because they're here in America and they never went through a curriculum, learning about like Native Americans, that's adequate. They're like, oh, do you still like live in teepees and all of these things? And and even the curriculum nowadays is they're still how they define, like, what is an Indian? Oh, it's a person who wears this loincloth and has red paint and a bow and arrow and yelps, so that's what we see. But even when we go to say the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., y'all may have gone there, and I think it might be blocked off since the event that had happened some time back, and But there used to be a tour that you could take in a Capitol building, and in the rotunda, if you look up, there's all of these pictographs of the history of the United States, and the tour guides will talk about them, but they're not allowed to talk about any of the ones that have to deal or that are depicting anything with Native Americans. So, we don't learn about Native Americans in school. We're not allowed to talk about them on a national government level. So it's a pretty steep climb and challenge to take our narrative back, and so I hope that helped answer your question.
Yeah, I think that's really important to acknowledge, is how warped our perspective is on Indigenous peoples as a country, the way that our education curriculum sort of frames Indigenous peoples as a past peoples, or a past lifestyle, or a past culture, not something that's still alive and thriving, which it is. One of the things that I wanted to turn back to was something you had mentioned earlier, which was when settlers and colonizers came to specifically the Pacific Northwest, but to North America in general, was that it seemed like there was all of this wild, all of these unharvested, uncultivated resources that were just there for the taking. Meanwhile, any Indigenous person could tell you that that wasn't the case, that the environment that was here and thriving for so long was in direct relationship with the people who were stewarding the land. I'm thinking a lot about Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is an Indigenous author and scholar. And she's got a wonderful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and she discusses this a lot in that book about the traditional practices of her people, and the way that that works in parallel with the land, and is a significantly more beneficial both for the people and for the land, in terms of like actual land practice, land cultivation, land relationship, things like that. And I think that that's something that isn't considered very, very often in a lot of Western science and Western policy, because it doesn't have this criteria that's essentially been established through Western science and Western policy. It doesn't meet that criteria for whatever reason. It might not be quantitatively like identifiable or something. But that doesn't change the fact that the practices of the people of this land had been working in relationship since time immemorial, right? And so I wanted to see if you had anything to sort of contribute to that in our last 5 minutes of the show.
Shout out to Robin Wall Kimmerer. So she's my auntie, and also my faculty research mentor in my undergrad. But still connect with her occasionally, and she's phenomenal at articulating what you're talking about here, our relationship with the land, and bringing native science to the forefront, and not less than Western science, not less than Western knowledge, and but as equals on an equal playing field, and justifiably and rightfully so. It was very intentional that our knowledge, our deep knowledge, our civilization goes back, and we had records, maybe not like how things were written by other cultures and whatnot, but we had records. We had native scientists, engineers, artists, writers, orators, philosophers, knowledge, legal frameworks, law systems that were very complex, governance structures. I mean, and the United States is loosely based off of an indigenous governance structure, you know. So we have a deep knowledge, you know, in a lot of different areas, especially in faith practices, you know, that really speak to our direct relationship with the land and you know, the powers that we believe in, and you know, just in respect and just given a broader perspective, like all cultures around the world advanced in very unique ways, you know, and I think what's going to come to the forefront for Indigenous people in the United States is that we had a deep connection with the land, and how our paradigms and our perspectives and our deep knowledge of it is going to come to the forefront now, because we're dealing with climate change and all of the challenges that come with surviving and adaptation to all of these things. And the world is going to be looking to Indigenous people to bring forth our knowledge and help us continue to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think it's about time that we start incorporating Indigenous science and Indigenous perspectives into environmental justice, environmental science, and policy work. So just to sort of round us out, summarize our conversation today, we've been talking about Indigenous perspectives in environmental justice and the intersectionality of that, and looking past into the way that indigenous peoples have been marginalized and oppressed, and the way that that has impacted where we're at now for environmental conditions, sustainability, climate change, climate justice, and the reasons for Indigenous perspectives being so important moving forward to consider is deeply rooted in that relationship to land, that reciprocity that's present in that that stewardship that had been present for time immemorial, and coming back to that in order to move forward and have continuing to have a strong relationship to land, and having a fundamental shift in our perspectives in the way that we view land, and having it be sort of an entity that we live with and that we are in relationship with, rather than as a thing to be owned or a thing to be cultivated. And so that is about the end of our show. I want to thank anyone who's been listening. So this is Rainier Avenue Radio, our Wise Action radio show. We are on our first episode live right now, and we'll be back not next week, but the week after for another environmental justice, climate justice, just transition topic. Again, my name is Nicolette Worrell. I'm with the Illahee Fund, and I'm here with my colleague.
I'm Johnny Buck, and hope you all have a great weekend and rest of the week. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And yeah, have fun, get out and enjoy nature.
Enjoy the sunshine, the warm weather.